Meanwhile, I took little Doug out for a short walk so he could do his business, and then tried to dull the pain with a couple of sips of Glenfarclas. I didn't sleep well and felt like crap the next morning. But little Doug and I were going on a trip. I've always thought of Cornwall as England's toe. It is as far southwest as you can get and faces the open Atlantic Ocean. Today, much of Cornwall is practically a retirement home for wealthy retirees from London who have bought up all the small cottages that were once the homes of Cornish fishermen. The hard-working fishermen were replaced by the silver-haired and wrinkled Mr. and Mrs. Beach. Many of these seniors have pet dogs to keep them company and provide an added incentive to stay healthy by going for a walk every day. I thought about taking little Doug to Belgium, but he didn't have an electronic chip installed and he doesn't have a pet passport, so that's not possible. It's probably a good thing he doesn't have a chip implant because he could be tracked. In any case, Cornwall was further from Surrey than Brussels. The drive to Newquay took over 5 hours, with a short stop along the way to allow little Doug to stretch his legs and relieve himself of the load I had packed and thrown away. The sweet lady at the animal shelter happily took him from my arms when I told her that I had found him wandering the streets of Newquay without a collar or any other sign of who might be his owner. She immediately recognized little Doug as a Shih Tzu, and I tried to tell her my joke about the zoo, but she didn't get it. She assured me that the dog would easily find a home, even if her owners could not be found, since she was exactly the kind of small dog that older people were looking for. For my part, I was glad that little Doug didn't whine when I left. He just looked a little puzzled. On the way out of Newquay, I decided to find a country pub for a late-night bite. When I asked the man behind the cash register at a gas station where I could get lunch, he said, "You can go to the White Horse." I probably looked at him in surprise for several seconds until I realized what he wanted to say. The White Horse Hotel was nearby. Soon I was sitting alone at a table in a quiet corner of the pub with a plowman's lunch and half a pint of good ale. I checked my cell phone for text messages and then called Jim Savage. Jim is a senior partner at a large management consultancy based in Surrey. Mandy and I have known Jim for a long time because he is ABC's main competitor. Jim is a fairly likable character, but he's kind of a wolf in sheep's clothing when it comes to running a business. Soon after Mandy and I started ABC, Jim tried everything he could to neutralize us. He offered us a well-paying job if we closed ABC and went to him. There is no doubt that Jim would have hired us, but would have gotten rid of us a little later when it became convenient for him. Over the years, we did not accept Jim's offer, but we met with him from time to time at various business events held by the local Chamber of Commerce. Jim was very interested in what I had to say. Despite the urgency, he agreed to meet with me the next day. When I got back to Surrey, it was already early evening, and I decided to call Mandy and tell her about little Doug. I still felt angry, but at least I was able to take action to calm that anger. I was sure that I could talk to her without telling her what was on my mind. By coincidence, my cell phone rang before I could call her. "Hi, Mandy," I said. "I was just about to call you. I'm afraid I have very bad news. This afternoon, little Doug somehow got out of the garden. He ran onto the main road and was hit by one of those damn multi-axle trucks." "Oh my God!" she cried out in fear. "What's happened? Is he okay?" "Sorry, Mandy, I'm afraid he's gone. I didn't see it myself, but a passerby came to me. She said that she saw the dog slip under the gate of our garden and run down the street. She couldn't stop her. The truck driver did not stop. Perhaps he didn't know he hit a small dog. There was nothing I could do. Buried him in the back garden." On the other end of the line, Mandy sobbed for a long time and then muttered something about her poor little Doug. Actually, I thought about killing the dog, but it seemed a bit too much. Well, I mean, you have to draw the line somewhere. I can't blame Tiny Doug for Mandy's decision to have sex with others. If I killed him, I would become a cold-blooded dog killer. He is not a wild animal like, for example, a wild goat. It also gave me a lot more satisfaction to know that little Doug was alive and well and living in Cornwall, while Mandy thought he was dead and buried. I expressed my condolences to Mandy and offered to buy a small headstone for Doug's grave. This sent her into another fit of tears, and we ended the conversation. She was clearly heartbroken, and there was no doubt that she would cry for a long time that evening, mourning her loss. My meeting with Jim Savage that same day went very well. After I explained what I needed, he said that he was pretty sure his company would agree to do the deal on the terms I proposed, and that he would have their corporate lawyer prepare a draft agreement for me to review as soon as possible. On the way home, I stopped at one of the real estate agencies in our area and talked about what they thought our house might be worth on the market. I thought that was a hell of a lot of money. Mandy and I were discussing what we would do in retirement, and our plan of action included keeping the house and renting it out. We discussed it with our daughters, and they decided it was a good idea, as long as we didn't sell the house. Now I had to make some changes to my game plan. I didn't call Mandy that night, although she was probably waiting to hear how she was coping with the loss of little Doug. I thought about it, but I wasn't going to be sympathetic. She would handle it herself and return home late the next day. According to what she told me, she was somewhere near Manchester, but who knows if that's true. Whatever she was up to and wherever she was, all I know is that I slept a little better that night, getting a little revenge for the grief she caused me. I woke up early and wondered for a while where little Doug was, until I remembered that he was no longer with us. I was blessedly relieved that I would no longer have to feed and water him, walk him, and bag his crap. This fleeting thought was immediately replaced by the return of the realization that I had much more serious shit to sort out. In England, divorce lawyers are called family lawyers. They specialize in family law, which, from what I can tell, mostly deals with divorce and death. There are many to choose from, and there isn't much difference between them. I didn't need anyone local, so I called and made an appointment with a family solicitor in Dorking. The name of the city appealed to my twisted sense of humor, and it was not far away. I was given an appointment for the afternoon. With time to spare, I checked the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Authority website for personalized registration plates, then visited a jewelry shop and did some grocery shopping before heading to Dorking. In between, I made phone calls to several business partners. By the time I got to the family law firm's office, my nerves were already a little frayed. I never expected to find myself in this situation. The secretary tried her best to calm me down and brought me a cup of coffee while I waited. The lawyer turned out to be another middle-aged woman who listened carefully to my story of grief, but warned me not to rush too much. For a brief moment, I wondered if she shared my wife's passion, but then I realized that she was probably interested in delaying the process in order to make more money. In my experience, lawyers are greedy people and rarely turn down potential clients regardless of the circumstances of the particular case. I pointed out to the lawyer that the divorce petition could be withdrawn at a later stage. Of course, from my perspective, it was unlikely, and the lawyer probably didn't care one way or the other. But she seemed satisfied that we had discussed options and agreed to file for divorce on the grounds of Mandy's infidelity. When Mandy returned home that evening, she was deprived of her food. It didn't help that I decided to make an extremely spicy beef curry. It was one of my favorite recipes, but she couldn't stand it. This was fine with me, plus it gave me an excuse to drink some of the excellent Scottish craft beer that I love so much, over dinner. I told her about the new contract I had managed to secure while she was away. I explained that I would be working up north in Yorkshire for a while, and I guess she decided it would just be another project, like all the others I had been working on all these years. She was still very sad about little Doug and was disappointed to learn that I was leaving for Yorkshire the next morning and would not return until late on Saturday evening. I didn't want to seem completely heartless, so after dinner I hugged her and we sat and watched TV. She cried quietly for little Doug, and I quietly breathed the fumes of beer and curry on her. My trip to Yorkshire was very fruitful. The deal had already been concluded over the phone, and the client had all the papers ready to sign. I knew several directors, and they were absolutely thrilled that I accepted an initial 6-month assignment with the prospect of moving to a permanent position. In addition to my fee, they agreed to pay moving costs, temporary accommodation in a local hotel for 2 weeks and half, the cost of renting a property in Yorkshire for the remainder of the period. Everything was ready so that I could begin work more or less immediately. Now, all I could do was consciously move away from Mandy. My cell phone rang that evening right after I checked into the hotel. I was looking forward to a pint or two of local Yorkshire ale and didn't want to waste time on the phone with Mandy. Mandy discovered the fish swimming lifelessly in the afternoon and tried her best to gently break the news to me. She was completely unaware that she was talking to the fish killer himself. I just didn't feed them anymore. "I'm really sorry I had to give you bad news, especially after you had to hold little Doug," she said. "I have no idea what happened, but there was nothing I could do to save them." "I think you're right, Mandy," I replied. "It's too late to save them. Leave the tank, I'll clean it and disinfect it when I return tomorrow." That Saturday, the atmosphere in our house was very subdued. It was only a short stopover for me as I had returned early in the morning and was planning to return to Yorkshire on Sunday. I had a list of things I had to do, including sorting through a pile of paperwork. Mandy went shopping and cooked dinner, which took her mind off my tasks, and we spent a quiet evening in front of the TV with a glass or two of wine, watching inflatable celebrities take part in television chat shows. Neither of us was in the mood for intimacy, probably because we were both too physically and emotionally exhausted for various reasons. To my surprise, for the first time in several days, I managed to sleep well. When I woke up, the shock in my body seemed to have eased and my mind had adjusted to the new reality. Feelings of alienation, uncertainty, and despair receded and were replaced by a grim determination to continue working and bring the best out of the bad. I still felt sad and empty inside me, but I knew that I was far from melancholy and had gained control of my emotions by focusing on the short-term results that I could achieve. After lunch, I packed up the car, kissed my wife goodbye, and drove off to Yorkshire. Mandy must have been shaken to her core when she was served with divorce papers a few days later. She had no warning, and I guess she thought she was just signing for some business papers. Of course, I knew when this would happen and made sure my cell phone was turned off that day. I'd like to think I wasn't being petty or cruel because I was very busy at work, but I have to admit that I liked the idea of not being on call for those few hours. Returning to my hotel room after work, I turned on the phone again, read the text messages, and listened to the voicemail. The gist of them was that she was upset, confused, and angry. I called her back without hesitation. "What the hell is going on, Terry?" she asked, getting straight to the point. "That's exactly the question I asked myself, Mandy," I replied. "But that was a week or so ago. I don't understand what you're up to, but I wish you would stop it," she said. "This is already beyond the bounds of a joke. It's actually like you're reading my script, Mandy." "What do you mean?" she asked. "Well, Mandy, at some point I wondered what you were up to," I told her. "Unfortunately, it's too late to stop it now, and it's definitely gone beyond the scope of a joke." "What are you talking about, Terry?" "Ainsley House Hotel and Bottoms Up Club." There was a pause, followed by a long sigh. "I'm so sorry, Terry," she said. "I really don't know what to say. I thought you'd never know, and what you don't know can't hurt you. Mandy, I found out, I know about it, and it hurts. Terry, we need to talk about this, but it's not something we can do over the phone. Will you come home on Friday?" she asked. "I don't think talking will help much," I told her. "I'll arrive on Saturday, Mandy, but I need to be back in Yorkshire by Sunday evening." When I returned on Saturday afternoon, Mandy looked very worried. I didn't unpack my things because I didn't know how events would develop. I planned to stay the night in one of the guest bedrooms, but wanted to be able to go somewhere else if things got difficult. In the face of life-shattering damage to home, family, or friends, Britons tend to put the kettle on and make some tea. Mandy soon sat us down in the living room with a cup of tea, and I waited patiently for her to speak. "First of all, I have to lay my cards on the table and say that this whole mess is my fault, Terry." I said nothing. "The fact is that I gave in to temptation. I found out about the Bottoms Up Club almost by accident, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it. You weren't home when I first came. I was incredibly nervous, to the point of wearing a masquerade mask, because I thought that if I could hide my face, people wouldn't see me. I thought I could just be an observer, watch while other people performed, and put on a show for others. I waited for her to continue. At first, everything was as I had imagined, she says. But then different people began to approach me, and this turned me on incredibly. It didn't take long before I allowed myself to be persuaded to take an active part. It was kind of scary, but after doing it the first time, I realized that these people are some of the most sincere, honest, and safe people I've ever met, which is another reason why I kept doing it. I found that I liked it. I like watching other people have sex, and I like being watched during sex. Part of this has to do with the idea that sex with other people can just be fun. It doesn't have to be such a big deal. She looked at me with hope and expectation. I agree, Mandy, I replied. Sex with other people can be fun. She smiled at me encouragingly. As far as I'm concerned, I continued, if you have no obligations to anyone else, you can do whatever you want, as long as it's between consenting adults. I sat and sipped my tea, watching her smile quickly disappear, and waited to see how she would react. As far as I could tell, Mandy acted as I expected. She had a plan, and she was going to implement it. She admitted that there was a mistake in her plan for which she was responsible, but there was no evidence of an apology, no regret for the damage caused, and no indication that the plan would be canceled. I knew her well enough to know that she would act like a dog with a bone. What I did from time to time with other men did not affect my feelings for you, Terry, she said. I love you very much, and our life together is wonderful. I just hope that you can understand that having fun with other men from time to time in a safe environment does not pose any threat to what you and I have. If you're not interested, you can just ignore it. If you're not there, you won't see anything. I think you're wrong, Mandy, I replied. Anyway, I'm afraid it's too late for me not to see anything. What do you mean? She asked. I know that you found out about payments to the hotel and club. Are you saying you saw me there? I looked into her eyes. If I remember correctly, around 8 o'clock on Monday evening a couple of weeks ago, you were having fun with 2 young Asians. Some people said that you like sex in public. Oh my God, she gasped. I am so sorry. Seeing me there must have given you a terrible shock, but please try to understand that it was always just a physical activity. It was nothing but an exciting adventure. That's all it could ever be. Believe me when I say that, I don't love anyone else and wouldn't want to love anyone else. Looking back, I know I should have talked to you, but I wasn't sure I could tell you. Well, you're right about that, Mandy, I said. I wouldn't be happy if you told me what you were up to. Maybe it was more exciting for you precisely because you couldn't tell me about it. I know you must be feeling hurt and disappointed, and I can understand your point of view, Terry. I agree that I may have made an error in judgment, but filing for divorce is an extreme reaction, don't you think? I don't think that's an extreme reaction under the circumstances, I replied. You decided to betray me by giving yourself to others. In my understanding, this is unacceptable, which is why I want a divorce. Mandy's shoulders slumped and she sighed resignedly. Can we at least think a little bit about what this will mean for all concerned before we go down this path? I just think we shouldn't give up on the status quo without thinking about the consequences. I'm already considering the consequences, I replied. We can take some time to think it over, Mandy, but it's unlikely that I'll change my mind. I left Mandy alone with her thoughts and went to the Fox and Hounds pub for a beer. I love pubs, but I never felt completely comfortable at the Fox and Hounds. Despite all the years we'd lived in the area, I wasn't going to miss it that much. The clientele was largely middle-aged, middle-class, pretentious assholes, and any day of the week, given the choice, a pint of Yorkshire ale would beat a watery southern beer. As I sipped my stale, warm, and relatively tasteless local beer, I contemplated my next steps. When I got back, Mandy had already started getting ready for dinner, so I went upstairs, carried my bag into the guest bedroom, and grabbed a couple of things I needed from the master bedroom. Our conversation over dinner was mostly about what our daughters were doing. Lucy had apparently taken Mandy's advice and was on a free search, looking for a replacement for her ex-boyfriend, who was now dating Lucy's BFF, much to her annoyance. I asked Mandy what a BFF was, and she explained that it stood for Best Friend Forever. It seemed unlikely to me that this girl would have this status for a long time. I've always considered Mandy my best friend. She knew that my attitude towards her was now comparatively cold, but I don't think she realized how much things had changed, perhaps because I was not rude or impolite. She seemed to be under the impression that our conversation that afternoon had led to some kind of ceasefire agreement. I wasn't going to dissuade her of this. On Sunday morning, I got up early, made myself some toast and coffee, packed my things, jumped the bug, and headed off to Yorkshire. I thoroughly checked and cleared the car of everything that belonged to Mandy, including several business files that I found lying in the back seat. I had already passed Watford when my mobile phone rang. "Where are you?" Mandy asked. "Did you happen to take the baby beetle to the garage?" "No," I answered. "I picked up the little beetle and am heading back to Yorkshire." "I don't understand. Are you saying that you have already left? Why did you take the little bug? And why didn't you say goodbye? I just decided to take a crumb of a beetle, and you were still sleeping." There was a pause as she processed the information. "I don't understand," she finally said. "What should I do without a bug crumb? You can use another car. Well, the one I usually drive. I still don't understand why you took my car, but I know you're not yourself right now, so I'll let you go this time. I'll make do with another car for a few days. Just drive carefully and make sure not to damage the beetle crumbs." By the next day, I was the proud owner of a small red Mazda MX-5 convertible that I spotted on the lot of a dealership in Yorkshire. I partially traded the bug minus the personalized registration plates. All the paperwork was done, and I posted an ad for the personalized registration plate on several websites. Mandy was very annoyed when she called me last week and found out that I had no plans to return from Yorkshire. "But how can I get my car back?" she asked. "No way," I told her. "I sold it." "What do you mean sold?" she screamed. "This is my car." "Actually, Mandy, it's not technically true," I replied. "I bought it, and my name is on the registration document." "But it's not fair, Terry." "Maybe yes," I replied. "I suppose you could argue that I gave it to you, and it's unfair for me to take it from you. But it's not much different from what you did to me." "Oh, stop it, Terry," she said. "It's not the same thing at all. You're just petty. But I understand what you mean. If you stop this nonsense and just return home, we can discuss everything rationally, settle it, and move on with our lives. Leave it to me, Mandy," I said, "and I'll come back to you." For the next week, Mandy called me every day, asking me to come back to Surrey to talk to me and try to figure it all out. The conversation was always the same until the day she found out that I had sold my stake in ABC. "How could you make such a decision alone?" She tormented me. "Why didn't you talk to me about this? I am the second shareholder of our company, so you should ask me before doing such crazy things." "Reasonable questions," I answered calmly. "I know that you are the second shareholder of ABC, and I know that my actions will seriously affect you. Believe me, Mandy, I completely understand that you are angry and upset that I made a decision unilaterally without consulting you. I am quite sure that you would not approve of my intentions, but in fact I did not need to ask you about the sale of my shares in ABC. I know how you feel because I felt the same way when I learned about your decision to have sex with others. I'm sorry you're upset, but no matter how you feel, the decision cannot be undone. You'll just have to accept what happened and adapt to any changes that happen as a result." "You're a bastard, Terry," she growled. The next time I called, a few days later, she was screaming and yelling at me, choking with rage, so much so that it was difficult to understand what exactly she was saying. When we started the company, we each had the same number of shares. She didn't realize that I had inherited my father's shares, which increased my share to 51%. It came as an unpleasant surprise when ABC's new majority owners froze the company's bank accounts and sent it an invitation to an extraordinary general meeting to consider proposals to replace the board of directors and complete the takeover. Mandy angrily told me that she now had no access to ABC's cash reserves. Don't you understand, Terry? ABC had over $200,000 in the bank. Because of what you did, we no longer control these funds. I do not know what to do. Now we cannot get this money for our pension. Sorry to have bad news, I managed to say when she paused briefly. But at least you still have a job. There was a sharp breath. Oh my God, she gasped, realizing what I said. There was silence, and then I heard the unmistakable sound of mournful sobs before she passed out. I think Mandy eventually realized that the deal I made with Jim Savage took ABC's finances and other resources into account. She didn't know that in exchange for 51% of the shares, I received twice the average annual turnover of the last 5 financial years, plus the equivalent of cash reserves. Another part of the deal was that Jim offered to retain Mandy as general consultant for at least 2 more years at a benchmark annual salary and additional performance-based benefits. Jim wasn't a sucker. I just knew keeping her as the face of ABC would be a good thing. During the divorce proceedings, our house was sold. Buying and selling houses in England is not easy. Bids are often contingent on other deals being made in a chain, where the bidder is counting on someone else to buy his property before he can buy yours. Not only that, but the best offers may be outbid at the last minute by someone offering more money after the official closing date. This is exactly what happened to our house. The best offer on the closing date was conditional on other transactions in the chain that would eventually result in us receiving money. However, the day after the closing date, the real estate agent received a slightly better offer, without chain or other encumbrances. I was very pleased when we decided to accept the unconditional offer, and I think Mandy was relieved that the deal went through. By this point, she had completely accepted the fact that we were going our separate ways. The deed transferring ownership of the home identified the new owners as Max Payne Associates. I made sure that the identity of the person behind Max Payne Associates was not revealed. I decided that this was a good investment. The house was in a prime location and could easily be rented out to create an additional source of income for a change management consultant living and working in Yorkshire. I haven't spoken to Mandy for quite some time, but she recently called me and asked if I had seen her wedding dress. Our daughter, Linda, and her boyfriend are about to get married, and it looks like Mandy really wanted Linda to wear her wedding dress on her big day. Mandy thought it might have been mistakenly packed and put with my things when we separated. Sorry, Mandy, I said. I have no idea where your wedding dress might be. I always try to tell the truth. I have no idea where the dress might be now because I took it and sold it to a lovely lady in Yorkshire who has an almost new shop. There's no way I would let my wife keep this wedding dress. Apart from her breaking her vows, I was determined to prevent my daughters from wearing it if or when I escorted one of them to the altar. Lucy called me a few days later. "Mom is furious, Dad," she exclaimed melodramatically. She just found out that the diamond ring that symbolizes eternal love that you gave her several years ago is cheap jewelry. It costs almost nothing. "Oh God, what a pity," I replied. She probably thought it was a very valuable ring and must feel very disappointed and unhappy. I think she would never have known the truth if she had not checked. Sometimes this happens in life. People attach value to things and then feel terribly disappointed if the value of something turns out to be much less than they thought. Of course, the original ring is safely locked in a safe deposit box in my bank. Who knows? Maybe it will come in handy if I find someone special. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.